Think like ultimately we really need to put ourselves in the shoes of someone who doesn't know crypto at all. Like, what does it actually take for them to understand why we're in it in the first place, right? So really need to strip it down to the basics and literally create content for every single step along the way. So obviously this is going to be like super tedious, and I assume everyone who is kind of like a part of the team building out all of these courses are crypto native on some level, right? And many steps like knowing how to create and connect your wallet to dApps that you want to interact with comes second nature, right? So for whatever dApp that you want to interact with, there's you intuitively go and look for the connect wallet button, and then you can either hit on like MetaMask, Rainbow Wallet, or Wallet Connect, and then sign some messages, and then off you go, right? But the layman doesn't know exactly what all of these are, and it might come intimidating to them because some actually have significant amounts of their money in there, right? So if they actually hit a wrong button, they're screwed. So I think like really, again, need to strip it down to the basics and put ourselves in the shoes of someone who does not know anything at all. So the explaining like I'm five concept. Hey, welcome back to Ownership, where we explore what it's like working in Web3, where individuals truly own their identities and assets and continue to ship ideas, products, and applications to promote decentralization. Today, we're chatting about the importance of education in Web3. James, who do we bring on for today's podcast?
Yeah, we had Rachel from StackUp and we had Tetranome from Bankless Academy. I think it was a really interesting conversation. It was nice for them to walk through their almost academy, like walkthroughs of their platforms, which was super interesting. And it was a real, I guess, great conversation on their insights, what they value with education, the learn to earn practices they have. And yeah, I hope everyone really enjoys the pod.
Yeah, definitely. I think before we jump in, we really talked about different use cases. We talked about considerations when we design these different courses for education. We talked about rewards mechanisms, concept of civil resistance, and ultimately brought it back to first principles on why education in the Web3 perspective is just so important. So without further ado, let's jump in. Hey everyone, welcome back to Ownership. We're just super excited to bring on Rachel from StackUp, as well as Tetranome from Bankless Academy. Today's episode is going to be about the importance of education in Web3. And Tetranome here, he is the project champion and design lead over at the Bankless Academy, and Rachel is the head of StackUp. So Tetranome and Rachel, can you guys just give a quick introduction about yourselves and a quick description of the educational platforms that you guys are building on top of?
Sure. Rachel, why don't you start?
Sure. So my name is Rachel, and I'd say that generally I'm still fairly new to the Web3 space, right? So I only really got into the Web3 space when I joined StackUp, right? Or its parent company, Tribe. And this was about a year ago, right? So I think as compared to all of you here, still fairly new to this, right? So I think today, what I would probably bring to the table is a little bit more of the just education in general, right? Because I have some experience over there, both informal and in informal settings, right? So like in more casual kind of settings, and in coding as well, right? So StackUp, right? I should give a little bit of an introduction to StackUp as well. And what StackUp is a learn and earn platform, right? So it allows people to learn general coding skills, I would say, right? So we do have things for both Web 2 as well as Web 3, right? And the ideal, what we see as the ideal in StackUp is we want to bring people from the Web 2 space to the Web 3 space, right? And also at the same time to kind of like allow them to upskill themselves as developers. Yeah, so that's a quick introduction.
Cool. Right, yeah, I'm Tetranome. Like Cliff said, I work at Bankless Academy as the project champion and design lead. So a lot of what I think I'll bring to the table in the discussion today is going to be along the lines of incentive structures, talking about UI and UX flow. So user journey is a really big focus at Bankless Academy, and maybe we'll get to touch on that later. So yeah, I come from a traditional games background, working in game studios, where I was actually an artist, but had a real interest in game design on the side. Like I would go to cafes and read books on Sundays. So really, really love that stuff. And when I got into Web3, I just got like swept away with what started as a passion project and is now really getting legs of its own. So yeah, Bankless Academy is, we're not really learn to earn. We actually consider ourselves more to be a public good, which is a very hazy concept, but we can kind of talk a little bit more about what that means as we get on in the conversation. but yeah, that means we're very much about community, and upholding Ethereum and Bankless values in both our content and our incentive structures. So, partnering with sponsors we really believe in the product of, that uphold values of Ethereum, etc. And we do this through these knowledge packets that are like 10-minute lessons about creating a wallet. We have a quest in there, so you have to actually sign a transaction to prove you created your wallet, etc. And then we develop that actually to go to blockchain fundamentals, Web3 security. And it's all just about making explorers, we call ourselves blockchain or bankless explorers, more confident in the space and more rug-proof, really. Yep, that's it about me.
Awesome. I have a Bankless shirt, but right now it's in the washer. So I'm a proud subscriber. Love Bankless. So really love what you guys are doing and the path that you guys are kind of working on. So I think what would make the most sense is for you guys to kind of give us a quick demo of what each of your platforms are like, just so viewers can understand what the UI UX is and what kind of courses they can kind of expect. So let's start with StackUp. So Rachel, do you mind just walking us through how StackUp kind of looks like?
Sure. Okay. Give me a second here. I'm going to share my screen. Yeah, can you all see my screen?
Uh-huh.
Okay, great. So this is the StackUp platform, right? This is the homepage after you've signed in, right? If you haven't signed in before, well, you'll see a slightly different homepage, but this is what we have at the beginning, right? So we have learning material in general, and because we are trying to gamify it a little bit, right? We actually call these campaigns and quests, right? So sometimes people come onto the platform and they are a little bit confused, right? They're not sure what's the difference between a campaign and a quest? And the difference there is that you can see it this way, right? A campaign is a little bit like a book, right? And then a quest is actually chapters inside the book, right? So this is some of the material that we have right now. I think I mentioned this just now as well, but we have general sort of coding material. So we have stuff on the Web 2 side, right? So general Web 2 development, your HTML, CSS, JavaScript, and then you also have development of Web 3, and we also look at things like Python and data science, right? So the idea is really to get developers up and to allow them to upskill themselves in these areas. Right. So these are some of the campaigns that are ongoing, right? The way it works on StackUp is that every Friday we actually have a campaign drop, right? So people, we've been doing this actually since the beginning, right? So by now our users on the platform, they are actually, they're tuned into what we do on Fridays, right? So we drop the campaign on Fridays, and then, we usually have a quest coming up that they can join once every 2 days, right? It's slightly different when we have certain types of campaigns, right? Like when we're working with our client partners, but other than that, that's the general schedule, right? So during this period of time, as you all can see over here on the side, right, this is the period of time that they can take part in the campaign. So if they take part in the campaign and submit their deliverables during this time window, they stand a chance. Well, it's not so much stand a chance because then that makes it seem as if it's not a guaranteed thing. But the way it works is that we have a reward pool. So let's say we have 500 rewards. So the way it works is the first 500 people then who meet the deliverable requirements will get their rewards. Right. So it's not like from a pool and then, you get selected in a sort of a, it's not something that happens by chance. Right. So, yeah.
So what I'm going to,
that's the word I was looking for that I couldn't get. Yeah. So generally I'm just, going to show all of you what that's like, right? In these campaigns, we have descriptions, right? And then we also have the learning outcomes from this particular campaign, right? So because this is something that we're currently doing right now, right? I'm showing this because, if anyone wishes to take part, they can actually join this campaign at this very moment, right? So then what we do is that we have split this campaign into 3 general parts, right? And these parts get released on slightly different days, right? So that, they can, the users, because they're interested in this, they know when it is that they can come back, right? And take part in these campaigns. So when you scroll down, you can see the quests in these campaigns. So for this one, there are actually 8 different quests. And the last one, the last 2 quests of this campaign will drop this Friday, actually, right? So the rest of them have already, they are already available, right? So you can click into them. And this is essentially the learning material, right? So what the users have to do is to read through this learning material, and right at the beginning, we tell them, okay, this is what your learning outcomes are going to be from this quest, as well as the deliverables that you have to submit, right? And at the end of it, the idea is that they will submit their deliverables, and then they will wait for the review period to come up, right? So yeah. I'll also, to give you all a general idea of what we have, right? We are building things up in Web3 development for some developer tools, as well as like Web2 development. We also have some campaigns and quests in Python, right? As well as in cybersecurity. So right now, however, on this path, we're building up some of these learning pathways, right? Always a work in progress. And so, we currently don't have some of these that I've mentioned, but that's the general direction that we're going in. So, yeah.
Awesome. Appreciate that. Tetranome, let's go with Bankless Academy. Show us what you got.
All right. Choose what to share. Entire screen. Let me know when you can see into infinity. Yeah.
Yep.
Got it? Okay, cool. Right, so this is Bankless Academy. There's some, this is our homepage, some information more about the product on there, but what's really the core focus is our lessons and which are in service of our user journey. So currently we have, I think, 7 live lessons ranging from wallet basics, blockchain basics, Web3 security, joining our community, layer 1 blockchains, DeFi basics, and DEX aggregators. And these are all lessons we built out over the last year or so. And I will demo, let's see, our layer 1 blockchains lesson that came out recently. So the first thing that you want to do, you can take any of these without signing into your wallet, but if you want the Web3 functionality, that is something we have to do. So I'm going to sign into tetranome.eth here. And this lesson screen actually kind of tracks your progress too, right? So typically the lessons will appear differently if you haven't taken them. And you can see I've taken all the lessons, of course. Except DEX aggregators. So if I go to revisit this lesson here, we're really focused on trying to appeal to a wide range of learners. So with me as with a background in art and game design, very focused on building design language that's a bit more subconscious. So our illustrations are very based around this idea of establishing a design language and then kind of riffing and building on it. So at this point, what you're going to see is a little more complicated as compared to what we start with, which is very basic. But here you have the explorer, which is the user, and just another user in the system. And this is talking about networks, and the blockchain trilemma. So usually our written content tries to be very short and concise, and then pair with the images. And we have keywords here for anyone who wants to expand their understanding or revisit a topic that we previously covered. You can see talking about the trilemma here, which is the security, scalability, and decentralization attributes of blockchains and the trade-off that must be made there. Then we have quiz slides. So this is to kind of, it's a level of gamification, and we expect to develop this system to have like much more variety in terms of these quizzes, because there's about 5 or 6 throughout a lesson. But yeah, generally we're just asking something about the last 1 to 2 slides. So the blockchain trilemma describes the relationship between, and then we're going to choose the answer that is the definition of the trilemma. And yeah, we kind of move through. Basically, you can spam the answers, which I'm going to do to get through to the end. But at the end, we then have a quest. So we're going to ask the user to kind of prove that they've learned the concepts of the lesson in like a verifiable on-chain way. So in this lesson, we have an activity that is to do with just the trilemma, which has been the main focus. So we're saying, okay, which chains are prioritizing decentralization and security, which are prioritizing scalability. So obviously we know Solana, and these are covered within the lesson. We use them as examples. And then you sort them into the right areas. And this quest is, you're going to see more of these activities as those quizzes throughout. And then the quests are actually usually, like I said, an on-chain kind of verifiable action. So our layer 2 lesson, which is coming out a week from this recording. It's in community beta right now. The quest is actually to hold Ethereum on Optimism. We partnered with we were given a grant and have worked with Optimism in building the lesson, and educator Patrick McCory, who you might have heard of, to build the lesson and to kind of refine all the information. And then at the end, in order to prove that you've learned about layer 2s and understood the concept of bridges, which we cover a lot in there, and why you would go to a layer 2 for scalability, you kind of prove that you've understood that by bridging your funds to Optimism, and then we check your balance, and then you get your badge. So you'll see here with this lesson, I have already claimed the badge here, but typically what happens in this process is if it's your first time, you're going to be prompted to sign up for Gitcoin Passport, and we actually have a UI that walks you through that. And I like to say that our website has like this user journey, but there's a bit of like a meta user experience that teaches you how to use other websites and sets you up with services that are going to be useful in exploring other websites. So setting you up with the Sybil resistance of Gitcoin Passport is going to let you partake in Gitcoin funding rounds and donate in the future. And I think we're going to really see like an upscaling of Gitcoin Passport utility in the coming months. But yeah, so we actually sign you up, or you sign yourself up for that in a very user-friendly, guided way. And then that makes you eligible to claim our badges. And our badges are a proof of knowledge component. So at the end here, normally I would be prompted to complete Gitcoin Passport for the first time and then mint my badge. These are kudos. We've worked with Mint Kudos, really happy with what's resulted from this collaboration. And they're on Polygon. So yeah, you basically start to earn these badges that are proof of knowledge on the Polygon network. And those have they're very composable. We can talk more about this later, I think, but they're almost like a primitive that proves that the wallet that is owns that badge has performed a task that shows they understand the topic that the badge was about. I'm sure I could have explained that a lot more clearly, but just rewind if you need to hear it again.
All good.
Yeah, and I think that's really the summary of what we do. The topics get more advanced, and we hope to take you all the way from being like a DeFi newbie or a blockchain newbie to being like a DeFi hero. So that's it for me.
I'll go. I think I can talk about the DYDX Academy that recently got released. So to just give you a bit of a background about it, we actually had a grantee who went through the DYDX grants program, product manage this DYDX Academy. It was released today. Hopefully you guys can see my screen. Yeah, it was released yesterday, sorry, on Valentine's Day. And yeah, everyone's really, really excited about the launch of this. Essentially, it's pretty similar, I think, to what you guys have built. It's a sort of gamified like learning platform to take people from a newbie who doesn't really understand how to put money into a wallet or deposit into the exchange or just DeFi in general, all the way to like an experienced trader, let's say, and using the DYDX platform. I'll be pretty quick with running through this, but essentially it contains a number of videos which are really interactive. I think 10 that could go from, what is a wallet, all the way to kind of advanced trading options. There's articles that are produced by community members, which is awesome to get those involved. And then there's this kind of like learn, level up and earn feature where people have to complete the task, earn a POAP. And like you said, it's kind of an on-chain verifiable reputation point for them in the ecosystem. So just to really quickly show you a dashboard. So they built this out recently where the first one is Self-Custody Pro. We can see actually today alone, this got released and 2,000 people have actually claimed this Self-Custody Pro POAP. Again, you open the task and it will kind of walk you through the step-by-step completion methods. And I think what's really interesting about this one is they've built it out in the sense that it requires you, very much similar to how you've done Tetranome at the Academy, requires you to complete each section, which are pretty actually complex and pretty tough to complete. And then as you work your way through those sections, you earn this POAP at the end and you become a Self-Custody Pro. And they've kind of timed these unlocks where, they're going to be unlocked periodically throughout the year to just level people up from an education standpoint. And I'm personally really excited to see the team who have built this hopefully continue to to bring in new co-ops, new quests, new contributors to the ecosystem. As they are a separate grantee to say the DYDX team per se. So it's been really exciting to see them build this out as a community member, and it's really, really impressive. I think everyone is in the ecosystem is generally impressed by the level of quality that's been produced.
It looks really good. Congrats on the launch.
Thank you.
Awesome.
Yeah.
Yeah, just some like quick comments on all three platforms. It seems like everything is very like doing instead of just like reading and doing quizzes. So yeah, I think like that's super important when it comes to like Web3. You really have to, get your own wallet, interact with some contracts, write some code, query some APIs for StackUp's case, or hold some funds on Optimism for Bankless Academy's case, or for DYDX Academy actually place trades. So yeah, I think like that's actually something that's not really explorable in Web2 per se. It's unique to Web3, and hopefully this is kind of like a good learning lever to kind of like onboard more people, because it's just more fun, right? Like you can actually do stuff instead of just like reading stuff and then like answering questions and getting a score. Yeah. So yeah, really, really excited about like all of these different platforms.
Maybe I can kick off the first question. I guess maybe go to you, Tetranome, first. Like when you were building out the campaigns and quests, kind of what mindset did you guys have in terms of like how do you think about where to start from? I mean, do you need to kind of strip it all the way back to basics? For example, like if you were looking to build out a quest to understand how to place a swap on Uniswap, but I think just talking about your academy specifically, like how do you think about, right, what's the process a user goes through, and how do you start a quest or a campaign that way?
Yeah, so the first thing we really do is we ask ourselves where in the user journey is the lesson being slotted in, and like what skill is it? What skills is it bridging, or what skill is it adding onto another skill? So yeah, like understanding the lay of the land first, and like where a user wants to go is very important for us. So we kind of use user research that we've done. We've done a lot of surveying, interviewing. And we've actually come up with Bankless user archetypes. So these user archetypes have different motivations and goals, why they're in the space, what they want to get from crypto or from blockchain tech. Some people want to get a job and work in DAOs. Some people just want financial freedom. So yeah, there's a big variety there. And we really like to consider like how can a lesson satisfy all those, as many of those archetypes needs as possible. And how can we do that in a way that doesn't degrade from the experience itself. So yeah, then usually after we've kind of understood the direction that the lesson is going to go in terms of those motivations and goals, we kind of look at the core skills that are going to go into that, and we design the quest around that. So the quest usually comes in early, mid development, and it's like it acts as a bit of a compass to us. Like, what does all the knowledge or information in the lesson add up to? What skill does it allow the user to complete that we can then verify in an on-chain way? Then we look at doing things like reaching out to potential partners or sponsors for the lesson. And like I said, we're very focused on Ethereum values and Bankless values. So to uphold those, we're usually very careful about who we partner with for these lessons. And I think we'll probably talk about incentive structures or something like that later and why that's really important. But yeah, so we've been really lucky to be able to work with 1inch on our DEX aggregators lesson, which then, of course, you get sent to 1inch to perform a trade and prove that you've understood the DEX aggregator lesson. And then for Optimism, like I mentioned earlier, they've worked with us on our layer 2 lesson. So you have to hold funds on their network. And both of these are kind of, I would say, bankless to the bone, right? Like they really uphold those bankless and Ethereum values. They're very interested in working with public goods. And of course, Optimism has its retroactive public goods funding. So you can see just how deep that runs. Then we go on to the actual content after we've kind of looked at these more overarching features. We actually go into creating a content outline. There's a series of reviews with the team, and then we flesh it out to go from more of like the block by block conceptual nature to actually full writing. It goes through editing passes, etc. And then we have a community testing round as well, where we reward our community with kudos and I guess, further opportunities, little goodies here and there, to actually go through the lesson and just provide feedback. And what's amazing is like we don't have financial incentives here. People have just slowly gravitated to the community and just want to help. And it's always the same people. Over the last year, it's like always been the same people and more people adding in. Sometimes we receive 25 people during the beta testing phase of like 2 to 3 days, which is really awesome. So yeah, we go through, implement that feedback, try to make everyone happy while maintaining the core intent of the lesson, and then we slap the publish button. So I hope that answers your question.
Yeah, that's super interesting. It's cool to hear that you partner with different projects as well and get that implemented into the academy. I guess Cliff, from you as well, like maybe to bring you into the conversation, like what's your view on this? Like how would you, I guess, think about the flows of starting out something educational or any content that way?
Yeah, I think like ultimately we really need to put ourselves in the shoes of someone who doesn't know crypto at all. Like what does it actually take for them to understand why we're in it in the first place, right? So really need to, strip it down to the basics and literally create content for every single step along the way. So obviously this is going to be like super tedious, and I assume everyone who is kind of like a part of the team building out all of these courses are crypto native on some level, right? And many steps like, knowing how to create and connect your wallet to dApps that you want to interact with comes second nature, right? So for whatever dApp that you want to interact with, there's you intuitively go and look for the connect wallet button, and then you either hit on like MetaMask, Rainbow Wallet, or Wallet Connect, and then sign some messages, and then off you go, right? But the layman doesn't know exactly what all of these are, and it might come intimidating to them because some actually have significant amounts of their money in there, right? So if they actually hit a wrong button, they're screwed. So I think like, really, again, need to strip it down to the basics and put ourselves in the shoes of someone who does not know anything at all. So the explaining like M5 concept. And if I were to compare this to like a Web2 analogy, it'd be like, documenting how to click the sign up button, right? When you want to create like a Facebook account. How do you actually fill in the KYC form? And where do you actually get the necessary information? How do you actually verify that your account has been created? So showing steps that, you have to actually put in your phone number and then wait for an SMS that contains the one-time password, keying it in, and then explaining the concept behind that and how to actually log in again once that account is created from a Web2 standpoint. So again, this comes second nature to a lot of us, right? And we really need to consciously put ourselves in the shoes of people who don't know crypto at all, strip it down to the basics, and hopefully one day, access to Web3 can kind of be synonymous to the everyday folk. So that's kind of like my perspective. Rachel, what about yours?
I'd say that like people on the target audience that we have, in that sense, our intended audience is slightly different from what I think you all have been speaking about generally at this point, right? Because you're talking about the average individual and how they can get onboarded onto Web3 as well as on crypto, right? Whereas I think the intended audience when it comes to StackUp is more of people who are aspiring developers, right? So you have some individuals who perhaps are already developers in Web2, right? Maybe they've already started their journey in like Web2 development, right? And now we're trying to get them into doing some Web3 development, or alternatively, people who are just, exploring development in general, right? So we do have in our community, there are quite a number of different types, I guess, of individuals, right? So because that intended audience is a little bit different, right? I guess we do go about it in a slightly different way. That said, I think a lot of the things that y'all have shared up to this point is the way we go as well. So for an example, when Tetranome mentioned getting the lay of the land, right, trying to, and then after that, trying to understand what it is that the community needs, that sort of thing. And then what Cliff said about looking at the different, like trying to imagine it from the perspective of someone who may not know things about Web3, right? So I think these are some of the things that we do have in common, and that when we are trying to come up with a campaign, one of the things that we do is we try to make sure that we're not assuming any sort of knowledge that they have prior to that. So the way we do that is, we start off from the very basics. And let's say, for an example, it is the case. So generally for each quest, for each campaign, I would say that there are maybe 3 different kinds of quests, right? So not necessarily 3 quests in terms of absolute number, but 3 kinds of quests. So usually we have the kind that's a little bit more theoretical, right? So you start off with that and then, kind of introduce people to whichever concept it is that they're looking at. So for an example, in the campaign that I showed just now, it would be an introduction to Circle, what it is that Circle does, so on and so forth, right? Or in one of the campaigns that, we created internally, right? It's that we did one on like Solidity, then it's an introduction to that, that sort of thing. And then that's after that, but we slowly move towards like, installing the kinds of tools that they need in order to be able to, build. And then finally, we actually get them to build on the platform, on the various kinds of like protocols themselves, or like, if we are looking at a Web 2 kind of thing, we get them to code, right, in some way or other. So that's why we have like, I would say 3 different kinds of quests, right? So the way we do it generally is that like if we're building something on Web3, we get them to use sandboxes, right? And then we get them to essentially get things from like testnet faucets, that kind of thing, right? So they don't have to worry so much about like, is this real in that sense, like, because Cliff was talking about like what happens when, you press one button and then like you think, I might lose like all of this, right? So they don't have to worry about that, right? So that's generally how we do that.
That's really interesting. Yeah, there definitely is different kind of facets of education, and it seems to be very platform dependent, right? I think for us as well, for DYDX trading, should I say specifically, I think, actually building out this education, having a deep understanding of the actual flow is imperative. And I think, I'd say the majority of users who actually trade on DYDX are crypto native, largely accomplished traders. Though I definitely think there's this requirement to cater for one, like this expert experienced trader, and two, this just basic trader who may want to dabble, want to onboard. It's their first time trading perpetuals. And I think it's a fine balance by striking the two.
Yeah, so I actually think like this is a pretty good segue to the next question that we have, and that's on how we can kind of like incentivize education, right? Because we can have all the content out there, but if no one consumes it, then what's the point, right? So I think for every product out there, not just on education, like user incentivization is actually a pretty important step. So what we've kind of seen in Web3 education is this concept of learn to earn, right? It's pretty widespread. What do you guys actually think about this model, and is it actually sustainable, right? Because to provide some context, there are many, many different worries that I can potentially think about, like, can users actually game the rewards? Or how can these campaigns actually be Sybil resistant? Or what's the right amount of monetary rewards to give out that can actually incentivize people to want to participate? So curious to hear like what you guys have on all those questions. Tetronome, can I go to you first on that?
Yeah. So the first question was, can users game the rewards, right?
Yeah.
The answer is yes. It's incredibly common, and I think anyone who's done this without any kind of Sybil resistance or mitigation has experienced this. And so we didn't even offer any kind of monetary reward. We were just offering POAPs, and man, like we had like thousands of people just come in and clean them all out. And we had to disable the feature because POAP reached out to us and they're like, "Hey guys, like we have to cut you off." So we this was a big hurdle for us, and so we've actually then, of course, sat down and asked, well, we really want to offer these badges. This is a core part of our product. So yeah, how can these become Sybil resistant? And Didier, our developer, was kind of watching the Sybil resistance landscape to try and figure out what a solution might be. And I'm a designer. I'm like, well, we'll just design it and make it ourselves. And I had some ideas, but Didier is a lot more patient, and he's very good with timing. So Gitcoin Passport was announced at a certain point. Actually, it was about maybe 4 months ago. And he was keeping an eye on it, and he said, "This is what we're going to use. This is what we need." So yeah, Gitcoin Passport is you basically you collect badges from different areas of the Web 2 and Web 3. So it's like if you hold an ENS name, you get that badge. If you hold if you have a Twitter account, you can get that badge. And the website, so like Bankless Academy, gets to choose how many and what badges we allow. So it's very like kind of customizable. And so at the end of the day, you try to make it, you try to disincentivize the farmers from going through the effort. Is the effort or is the reward worth the effort, right? And so really, you could still come in and farm 10 badges from Bankless Academy in an afternoon, but you can't, like, to do it for 1,000 or 2,000 badges. It's just totally like unscalable for one person to perform this attack. And this is really big mentality for us, is we're not trying to stop Sybil attacks, because I don't know, until we're scanning our irises and doing all these things that I know crypto people are actually very against. I don't think you're going to be able to do that. And even then, you can buy some eyes on the black market or something, right? So there's always ways to game the system. And so we talk more about Sybil, mitigation rather than being Sybil attack proof or something like that. And then another topic is, we mentioned learn to earn. We really don't consider ourselves learn to earn. It's a very different game for public goods. So, sponsors of our lessons can reward badge holders as they please, right? That's one of the attractive qualities of Academy, is we have these badges that can be very composable. So yeah, for us, it's more about designing the incentives to really consider the effort and the reward, and to lower the payoff for the amount of time that it would have to go into gaming the system. And monetary incentives, obviously, it's one of the rawest incentives, so it's very strong. And this energy, right, this financial energy, this desire to make money, or this desire to invest or buy, is still something that we plan to work with. But we want to channel that energy into more productive areas like collectible content. So if you guys saw Bankless HQ recently did, you can collect certain very notable podcasts that they've hosted, like with SBF or with Vitalik. And we want to do the same thing with our lessons. And what this does is it allows our strongest community members to come in and channel that financial interest, at the same time as perhaps appealing to investors who want to flip these NFTs or something like that, right? So we really try to think about energy, incentive structures, on top of nice to haves like actual Sybil resistance that goes on top. Is there more to that that you'd like to hear about, or maybe we can hear from Rachel?
Yeah, let's go to Rachel first. But my follow-up question that you can kind of prepare for, it's more of what's the right amount of monetary rewards that can actually incentivize participation? Because some courses out there can be very, very well designed, but they just don't have that economic incentive to really get people to want to use it. So
all right,
maybe we can go into that later on. And Rachel, let's hear your take on Sybil resistance and how you can kind of prevent people from gaming all the rewards.
Yeah, so I mean, I think that's something that at StackUp we are very aware of, right? And I think, as everyone knows, it's a bit of a cat and mouse game, right? Because each time, you come up with something else to, these are systems that I think if users really want to, go around these systems, if they want to game the systems, they will keep trying to find ways to do it, right? So I think even for StackUp, it's something that we're always aware of. And I think one of the things that we do is we look at various kinds of data points, right? That we can use to kind of identify individuals, right? Sometimes from their submissions themselves, right? Because they have to, in order to get the rewards, right? They actually have to make submissions, right? So, doing things like identifying submissions that are really similar to each other, right? As well as, looking at certain data points that they have, they have given us, right? They have agreed to in signing up for the platform, right? To sort of make sure that, these are not actually, I think another thing that we also do is to, that is really quite important is, because this is a sort of, it is a learning platform, right? So I think to let people know what the policy is as well, right? To ensure that they're very well aware, because sometimes when it comes to some of our community members, we do have people coming to us and telling us, well, I didn't know, that I couldn't do this, right? Or yeah, so you do have things like that. So and given that some of the users, I think perhaps they are maybe a little bit younger, or they are from countries that are developing countries, right? Countries from the global south, right? Maybe they're not aware of exactly what is, things have to be said fairly clearly, right? In certain cases. And I guess the boundaries in that sense have to be drawn, right? And yeah, so this is something that we try to do, right? Essentially looking at sort of different kinds of data points to be able to identify users who are, not being they are essentially not being good members, right? And yeah, to make sure that the policy covers all these sorts of things, right? Yeah. And I think that part that Tetranome mentioned about this idea of disincentivization, right? That's always something that we're working towards as well, right? How it is that we can structure our learning material as well as the way in which we give out rewards, right? To ensure that so this is something that we continue to work on, I think, so that it makes it harder for people to in that sense, even if they wanted to, create multiple accounts, right? What would they have to go through in order to be able to withdraw that sum of money? That's something that we're looking at.
Yeah, I think
Sorry, James.
sorry, Tetranome, you go ahead. No, you go ahead first.
Just a quick point. I was going to say it's really difficult to balance this Sybil resistance, where you're trying to de-incentivize a certain type of user while still incentivizing your learner, right? Like you don't want to degrade the learning experience just because you wanted to prevent farmers, because then no one uses the platform. So yeah, good thought.
Yeah, agreed. It's tough, right? I think there's all this emerging technology that's coming out in the sense to really reduce, improve Sybil resistance, I guess. GK proofs, to what extent that can be used at an academy level, I think TBC, but I think it's definitely been experimented with now, and I think that is a method of making sure that a person is real, I guess, and obviously you can do that with multiple wallets, which makes it a little bit more difficult as well. It's definitely tough, and I think probably there's no real silver bullet to help prevent that. I think as well, you can definitely make content more difficult. You can definitely change content up over time. But I definitely think, like you said, there's always going to be people out there that are going to try and gamify things just to try and scramble as many POAPs as they possibly can over a quick succession. I think, like you said, Tetranome, right? Even looking at our academy, the DYDX Academy that got released today in the first quest, over 2,023 people have claimed POAPs already and have gone through the process. So super difficult to try and manage that, and hopefully something that improves over time.
Definitely recommend checking out Gitcoin Passport. It's been massively helpful for us if it clicks in with you guys.
Oh yeah. Sweet. Yeah, I'll bring that up. I don't think they've used that. That'd be helpful.
Awesome. Yeah, so on the second part of the question, right? So what is the right amount of monetary rewards that can incentivize participation? Any thoughts? Tetranome, do you want to go first?
Sure, yeah. Yeah, so I think I honestly would say for products that are really early in development on this, if you have alternative funding sources, which for us, we get public goods grants and public goods funding. We work with sponsorship on a bit more of an unconditional basis, based on vision. Monetary rewards really aren't in the game for us. And like I said, the communities that we partner with, they can decide whether or not they want to distribute that. But we really like to look at, if we want to incentivize people to use the platform and we're not using money, what might we actually use? So working with Optimism, we really considered what could those badges do for the Optimism community? And Optimism is very much going for this digital nation state kind of approach, right? Where they have citizens who can partake in certain parts of governance, and it's separated from token voting. It's, I guess, a bit more meritocratic, or has elements of meritocracy. Meritocracy in itself is a whole other discussion. But, in salt and peppered in, I think that there are very interesting things that can come from it. So you can almost think of our badges as an accolade for the citizens of Optimism to say, I actually learned about the fundamentals that underlie this community that I partake in, and I understand the technology. And that could lead to qualifying for certain positions in governance. It could lead to qualifying for maybe not even something to do with Optimism, but just a job, right? So you have these proof of knowledge credentials that suddenly show up as skills on your resume. We could look at job board integration in the future, right? So you could have some sort of Optimism job board or the Bankless job board, and maybe these kind of qualifications, especially as we expand our curriculum, actually hold weight and merit in these areas. And then this could also be some sort of governance value on the Bankless Academy website. We don't have any announcements to make there, or this is something that is very much a future thing. But if we were to have not necessarily a token-based governance system, but that more meritocratic, or even just hey, prove you were interested in the content we're building and show like you partook in some of the creation of the content or the reviewing of the content, or you helped someone on our forums. Like when you look at this, these are all incentives for a type of user, and it's the type of user we want. And these are all things that are useless or do not scale to attack for farmers. So again, it really, I know that's a bit of a cheeky answer to your question, but that's really how we're thinking about this. And yeah, back to you.
Thanks. Rachel, what about yourself?
So I think the way we think about it is that it really depends on your audience, right? It depends on what you're trying to do and who you are aiming to attract, right? And I think because one of the things that we are trying to do is to get people from the Web 2 to the Web 3 space, we offer both, like when we're offering rewards, we allow them to withdraw these rewards in both fiat currency as well as in cryptocurrency. So, I think that one of the things that does is that it does make your audience a little bit wider, because, you're attracting individuals who may not believe in cryptocurrency in the first place, right? Or who may not believe so much in the Web3 space, right? Who may not even be as interested in that. But then, because we did have this period of time where, when we were first starting out and people would be asking, is StackUp real? Do they actually allow you to withdraw the money, right? And, they're asking around, and then you see that like going around Twitter and everything, right? And, I think, but once they are able to do that, and we have seen this happening on the platform as well, right? First they start off like withdrawing in fiat currency, but then after that, as time has passed, we've seen more and more like a greater percentage of the withdrawals coming from cryptocurrency, right? So we can kind of see like a little bit of a shift in that direction. So yeah, I'd say that, it really depends on the types of individuals that you're hoping to reach out to, right? And if we're talking about like, how much is enough to incentivize people, I think that really depends quite a bit on the individual, right? So, yeah.
Yeah, I agree. I think it's very like industry dependent as well as kind of, I guess, like genre and context specific. I think if it's talking through like, if you're an endorsed delegate or if you're a delegate of a major protocol and your role is to like educate certain aspects of that voting process or proposal that's come through, I definitely think that should be incentivized. I think, they're almost like full-time jobs alone. I think a lot of the time it's trying to have, niche knowledge, but be kind of aware of the whole kind of abreast of information that's coming in from a DAO. I think when you think about like education in the form of actually getting community members to contribute to like resource production, content, media driven types of things, I think, I definitely think they should also be contributed. They should be compensated for that. But if I think it's in general kind of like people completing the DYDX Academy, I definitely think gamification of rewards is sufficient. And I think, there's definitely different levels to it. And I think overall, you should definitely pay for the quality and attention it brings, I think, in the long term. But I think the way things are structured at the moment, especially from like a governance standpoint as well, I don't think, let's say, top level contributors are compensated enough. And I think hopefully maybe over 2023, as kind of DAO tooling and DAO governance, I guess, progresses, hopefully we may see more structures come to light from that.
Yeah, I think non-monetary rewards like on-chain credentials and POAPs are obviously very popular amongst like crypto folks, right? Do you guys actually think that people who aren't into Web3 at all actually care about such credentials? And when do you actually think these rewards should be issued along with the education journey for like a non-crypto normie?
Actually, I think that was something that I was kind of interested in, like, as y'all was speaking as well, right? Because it's definitely true that there are certain kinds of rewards that will only that would definitely be interesting for people who are in the Web3 space already. But if the idea is to try to get more people who are not already in Web3 to get into Web3, right? To offer them these kinds of the sorts of rewards that you mentioned, like co-ops and stuff like that, right? I wonder how much that manages to achieve that sort of effect, right?
Yeah, it's kind of true.
What do you think?
Yeah, I actually think that, token airdrops or POAPs actually resemble a lot of Web2 incentive programs, right? It engages and incentivizes users and hopefully gives them that intrinsic interest to become educated about a particular platform or product. So honestly, I feel like if the rewards are designed nicely and well enough, and you have that sweet spot where you can kind of like lure people in to do more, to do more, to do more. Maybe like give the rewards out in phases. Maybe that's gonna be helpful, right? So yeah, that's kind of like my basic thoughts. Honestly, like I haven't really designed like a whole education like campaign myself. So this is something that I'm scratching my head against, right? Like, would my mom actually be interested in like a POAP or like an NFT? Would she actually care? So yeah, it's interesting, and yeah, I don't have an answer for that, unfortunately.
Yeah, I think honestly it's both, right? I think it sounds like a bit of a cop out, but I think both things are important. And I think just like people want a certificate of completion for some course in the traditional world as a method of like proving competence, the POAP and or kind of on-chain reputation from a POAP or like DAO score is the Web3 version. I think there was a tweet out earlier today by Li Jin, I think, that touched on this point of like token airdrops and POAPs resembling Web2 incentive programs. There's obviously a difference right now in Web3. I mean, airdrops are typically given retroactively to users who have been active initially, and so they can game the system. So I definitely agree that there's going to be some changes, or there at least should be some changes over the course of time. And there should be more engagement strategies to incentivize like current users, or at least kind of drive a current user to become a power user, or someone who's more active in a DAO, or someone's active in a community. I think that is what incentive programs might come to play in this year. And I think, like you were saying, Tetranome, education in the sense of a public good is really important. And I think additionally, when we think about it from like a DYDX standpoint, on the flip of it, I think it actually has like a material role in sort of reducing churn and increasing the stickiness of the user, and contributes to the long-term retention of the protocol. And I think it should be seen as an almost flywheel for growth in some sense, but obviously it's difficult right now with like attribution tracking with Web3 data. Obviously you have wallet addresses and things like that, but I do think educational programs will and should be designed, I guess, with one, yes, there should be some form of public good to onboard people into DeFi, DAOs, etc. But I think similar to how this tweet thread was published earlier, I think like lifetime value of customers and all users is important, and what drives users to that product is going to be like an important thing to consider as well.
Well, if you think about like you could have imagine that you don't have a financial incentive right at the start or directly built into the game of learning, but the knowledge that you learn along the way provides financial value in the long term. And DYDX Academy is a very big example of that, right? Where you are picking up skills that are going to make you money. It's just a delayed gratification. And, I think we could all use a little bit more delayed gratification in the world, but it doesn't make number go up in terms of users. So walking that balance is definitely a bit more interesting. But Clifton, to your point, asking about like, how do we make Web2 users care about the credentials that we're giving out, or these non-financial incentives? I think it's really like, I'm sure everyone's downloaded a game on their phone or something like that, and you start getting resources or badges, you don't care, right? Like, but you just kind of play the game because it's fun. And then after long enough, you actually start to care about the rewards because you start to build a context of what they unlock, what they do. This lets me get a whole new tier of soldiers. This gives me a new gun. It lets me get more fluffy animals in my garden, right? Like, so you can start to understand that these. No, I lost my train of thought. All right. Well, we'll have to.
All good.
So yeah, good.
So back to you guys. Sorry, if it comes back to me, I will. I'll plug it in.
Sounds good. Cool. I guess lastly, as I'm aware, we've gone on for quite a while, which is awesome. But I guess lastly, I missed the question at the start of like why is education in the current Web3 world important? I guess Cliff, you've been quiet this episode. I'll fire at that one for you first.
I mean, obviously, it's super apparent to me that Web3 education is important because it's important to not just collectively group crypto with the likes of SBF, for example, with the likes of 3AC, right? So when like the whole market crashed and when FTX happened, people were like, why are you in crypto? Isn't crypto just this like scary place where scam artists are everywhere, where, funny money happens, where nothing really gets done, where people just get rich and some people get scammed? Like, what's the whole point of all of this, right? So I think like it's super important to really go first principles and let people understand what exactly cryptography brings to the table, how it can actually enable individuals to truly have sovereignty over their identity, their assets, right? How public-private keys really can enable that kind of freedom. Instead of just like, grouping it with the sexy narratives like, oh, Bitcoin just went up 40% today. Let's all be crypto bros and let's jump on this bandwagon and get rich quick, right? I think it's super important to really bring that message across and really educate people on why are we doing this in the first place, right? Obviously, there are people that are in it for the money, right? But the immense advantages that this brings over whatever we are living off today, right? Like, say, for example, from an identity standpoint, right? Your email, your location, everything is actually data that you don't own, your identity, right? These Web2 companies are essentially just like, selling your data to to all of their customers without, your consent, right? And that is not okay, even though that's how things are, right? If I want to transfer some money to like, my relative who is in China, for example, or in Taiwan, like, I don't want to wait like 4 or 5 days because it might be an emergency. I don't want to pay like a 30% like transfer fee. Like cryptography and, Web3 actually enables that to be instant, right? And you're just like paying for block space and everything is just going onto the blockchain. It's immutable, it's transparent, everyone can kind of see, what's going on. And it's just a lot more difficult for all of these shenanigans to happen. So obviously, like, I'm super passionate about, really spreading the benefits of Web3 as a whole, beyond just like, making crazy amounts of money. Obviously, who doesn't want to make money, right? But, it's really all of these like intrinsic benefits that I really hope the everyday normie can kind of be like aware of, and knowing that we can actually progress to make things better, knowing that we should actually, question the status quo and understand how we can kind of progress as a civilization, right? To be more transparent, to do things more efficiently, to do things in maybe like a peer-to-peer format instead of going through intermediaries. I think it's super important. So long story short, I know I touched on many, many different points here, but I think it's super important for people to understand exactly why we are in it, and not just, collectively group us with all the sexy headlines, right? Yeah, that's kind of like my answer to why Web3 is important and why education in Web3 is so important.
Cool. Rachel, anything from you?
I think that's like pretty interesting and I guess quite on point as well, for maybe my own experience as well as my experience with my friends, because I'd say that with my friend group in general, a lot of them consider themselves to be non-technical people, right? But these non-technical people, they have a lot of values that are actually aligned with Web3 values. But the thing is, because I think the whole idea of Web3, like, even the name itself, Web3, I think is like associated with, technology or this idea. And let's face it, it's still not, I mean, it's a lot easier than before, but it's still not easy to like sort of get yourself into Web3, get yourself into like, I think most of my friends have not even heard of the concept of a DAO, for an example. Because, they consider themselves non-technical people. And then like, if MetaMask, all of these, like, these are not things that I think, like, I had one friend I remember who was like, she heard about metaverse as in like Facebook metaverse. And she was like, what is this thing? And I think for a lot of people, they see, as Cliff said, I think this, when you say Web3 or when you say blockchain or when you say crypto, they associate it with all of these, these sexy headlines, right? With what is happening with all of this money, with all of the different crashes and things like that, people losing money, right? Because they decided to put all their savings into something. And I think that's how they see it, right? Even though I think a lot of their personal values are actually very much aligned with Web3 values. So they don't really see, I think, the other side of things. And so that's why I do think I think that the education is important, right? To try to get people there. And I think that's why also in that sense, developer education is important. Designer education is important so that, there can be UX, like Web3 can have a sort of UX or build towards a sort of UX, right? That really can integrate people who may not, in that sense, consider themselves technical, because I think, the values are pretty, they're what we talked about, and I think that's.
This is such a nice close to the conversation too, because it's like so hopeful. Yeah, and Cliff, I really like what you said about using education as a tool to. It's not just about teaching people how to use the systems, but also to kind of spread or separate the degen from the regen. I don't know if viewers and everyone here is kind of familiar with these terms, but Kevin Owocki is a big proponent of the regen term, right? Regenerative crypto finance instead of what we would call more traditionally degen activity, where you're just in it for the money and trying to make a ton of stuff. You're trying to build systems that really change the way we use the most powerful incentive structure in the world, which is money. So yeah, it's finding a place, finding a system that makes that degen energy, like we were talking about before, productive within the system. So how can you channel that human greed that's like just in everyone to actually be a productive part of society instead of what we see very commonly today, which is very different. But yeah, I think like Web3 education and Web3 in general is really about questioning the systems that we live in, right? It's very humanitarian, but very technical. And well, I mean, there's a lot of great lofty goals and ideals, but also a lot of challenges along the way. So like, for example, when I explain the ethos of Web3 to people, like they love it. Like it makes them really hopeful. It makes them understand that like it actually works. Like we're rethinking system design of like global monetary policy, especially when you say, we're separating money and state, like we separated church and state in many places in the Western world. But what I mean to say is that Web3 education is like, it's also kind of a hotbed for new innovation and finding not just better ways to build systems, et cetera, and like educate ourselves, get more people in, build better systems, and be critical of ourselves, reflect. But it's also, maybe I'm overcomplicating it, but what I'm trying to say is like Web3 education kind of affords emergence, and we actually learn more about ourselves because we bring more people in from different backgrounds. And that emergence and reflection is just like so important for growth. I mean, anyone who's been on a personal growth journey, right? Like you have to go through experiences, you digest those experiences, you reflect, you learn, you grow your outlook on life or anything like this. And I think this is very much a movement-wide thing that's happening too. So yeah, maybe a bit of a meta take on why I think it's so important, but I really believe that. I really do.
Awesome. What a banger, huh? Of a closing statement. Cool. Yeah. Really appreciate you both, really jumping on and taking an hour out of your days to kind of like talk us through why education is important in Web3 and some of the design considerations when you build out courses, rewards mechanisms as well. So I guess like to close it off, obviously none of this has been financial advice. Crypto is risky and you can lose what you put in, to quote Bankless. So please do your own research, right? Web3 is young, we're all still super early, and we can't wait to see you own your own data and assets, join different communities, participate in governance, and continue to ship ideas to promote decentralization. Appreciate it, everyone. Have a good one.